My name is Lacey Driscoll, and this is my presentation called Women in Violence 48 Hours in the News. This presentation captures 2 days of headlines from mainstream media sources that refer to violence against women. While browsing my daily news and social media, I saved links to articles I noticed mentioning violence against women. I have found that there were multiple articles daily, with most resulting in sexual assault and/or murder. Some of the victims knew their assailants, some were political, some involved children, some were domestic, and some were random. But one thing they all had in common was that the assailants were all male. The observation of global media shows that society has an issue regarding violence against women and that there is still a lot of work to do to resolve this. Violence against women is an issue that affects not only women, but society as a whole. The increasing awareness over the years has brought down rates of violence, but current statistics are telling us that this violence is still a concern in our communities. I chose to observe violence against women after a recent discussion with a male friend regarding the topic. I disagreed with his statement that men represent an equal percentage of victimhood in domestic disputes, and I used this opportunity to research this gendered violence epidemic. This project has helped me to understand why we see so many female victims of violence and how the media coverage depicts the situation to viewers. The oppression of women stems from society's cooperation in a systemic structure of patriarchy. Women being viewed as the weaker gender results in higher rates of unemployment, lesser paying jobs, obtaining more responsibilities in the household, higher rates of domestic abuse, among many other negatives. For 2 days while browsing over my daily internet routine, I saved a link to any article that referenced violence against women. I only used a 48-hour window and did not consider sites that were outside of my typical daily viewing. I browsed the Leader Post, the Star Phoenix, CBC, and MSN headlines each day, and because I wanted to observe what I would see on an average day in the media, I decided to keep the observation just to 48 hours and to only sites that I visit on a regular basis. This helped ensure me that my results were accurate representations of the types of headlines I would typically scan over, and it kept me from searching for headlines that would favor my opinion. A couple headlines I found, this is the first one I found on Saskatoon Star Phoenix, about a serial killer in California who has killed 12 and raped 45. This man may be in his late 70s now, and the FBI is offering $50,000 for new clues. This one here is clearly stating that we have an issue here in Saskatchewan right under our nose. This article comes from the Saskatoon Star Phoenix and says that the panel is to start reviewing domestic violence deaths in Saskatchewan this summer. This one here is from Regina Leader Post. A woman was dragged into a car and sexually assaulted. This article I found to be a little biased, as it did mention that she was alone, walking in a bad neighborhood in the late hours of the night, and alcohol was involved. I don't personally believe that any of these things should mean that it is okay to be a victim of this type of thing, but that's the way society works right now, so we got some work to do. This lady here is a left-leaning politician from England. She was fatally shot and stabbed by a older, like middle-aged Caucasian man. She's very pro-immigration, and that has caused her her life. This one here is a female parking officer has accused 3 police officers of sexually assaulting her in a hotel room a couple years ago. The Tori Stafford murder appeal. This one is about a young girl seen in this photo. She was sexually assaulted and then brutally killed 7 years ago. There was a male and female involved in her death. The female helped lead her away, and the male was charged with the sexual assault and first-degree murder. Jerry Constant was the murderer of Karina Wolf. She was also sexually assaulted before she died by strangulation from this man. She was then thrown out into the trees to be found many years later, just recently. This Amish couple in the States had gifted a teen to a alleged rapist. So here we have, statutory rape as well going on here, kidnapping, a lot of terrible things. This graphic is from the Montreal Gazette, and I found it interesting. It's pretty new as far as different types of things that are affecting girls these days. One thing that's new to this type of harassment now and violence that wasn't a factor when I was growing up is social media. And one stat here is during the one school year, 36% of female students in grades 7 to 12 experienced sexual harassment through texting, email, Facebook, or other electronic means. That was quite shocking for me to see. As of 2010, there were 582 cases of missing and murdered Aboriginal women and girls in Canada. Also, another alarming stat here is 15 to 25% of North American female college and university students will experience sexual assault during their academic career. This one here as well is pretty alarming. Out of every 1,000 sexual assaults, 997 assailants walk free. Most are not reported to police, but this is pretty astonishing. Some literature I looked up here is The Enduring Themes and Silences in Media, Portrayals of Violence Against Women by Patricia Eastiel, Kate Holland, and Keziah Judd. This article looks at how the media represents instances of domestic violence through different outlets such as newspaper headlines, television, and journalism. The authors depict how bias, personal opinion, or simply word choice can affect how a story is relayed to the audience. This affects how stories of domestic abuse can be interpreted differently based on the understanding of the viewer, as most articles are not written in a black and white or factual manner. The argument is that the media presents a problematic picture of gendered violence. This article links to the literature in our gender sexism chapter, especially the narrative about the results of sexism and how they connect to patriarchy. Next, I read Measuring Violence Against Women, Statistical Trends. These are statistics by Stats Canada with subcategories including prevalence and severity, risk factors, impacts, emerging areas, and future directions, as well as responses. Statistics like these are great because it gives victims and abusers the ability to say their piece anonymously so we can get some real answers by the number. Tough Guys 2, Violence, Manhood, and American Culture by Jackson Katz was a video we watched in our gender and sexism chapter, and I found it to be extremely informative and just a great movie. He discusses the effects of masculine violence in regard to domestic violence, the relationship between the media and violence, stats linking men to the large representation of abusers and the lack of females, the tendency of the media to avoid gendering violence committed by men, the systematic failure to focus on male violence, and the invisibility of the dominant role. He's a great way of speaking. He's to the point and he's clear and he's got his mind made up on what he believes, and it's good information. He also discusses the lack of females acting out with violent behavior, which makes violence a gender issue. Framing Deadly Domestic Violence, Why the Media Spin Matters in Newspaper Coverage of Femicide. This article is about the power of media and how it is a problem as well as a solution. How the media has control to drastically change information and public opinion. And in many cases, the media miss the opportunity to use their influence to portray femicide as an issue deserving of public outrage and intensify policy development. My findings, my observation of the headlines alone, accompanied with these articles, have really emphasized Jackson Katz's point regarding the lack of male wording in the headlines. Instead, the media has almost completely avoided use of pronouns altogether. Violence against women, although more predominant within certain groups, does not discriminate against those that it affects. These headlines show young children, young Aboriginal women, and middle-aged Caucasian women all being victims. 4 of the 8 articles cited sexual assault in the headline. However, 6 of the 8 experienced sexual assault. A number of the theorists have used the concept of framing to analyze the role of the news media in shaping public opinion and policy on a range of socio-political issues. I found that no one race represents a large percentage of assailants, or victims for that matter, in these specific headlines. The perpetrators here are Caucasian, Aboriginal, East Indian, and they range from early 20s to late 50s. Even that one serial killer may be, over 70 at this point. According to Jackson Katz, senseless violence will continue until we challenge and change these cultural belief systems. While watching Tough Guys 2, one specific quote caught my attention, and that's when Katz says, "They say violence against women as if it's nobody's actually committing the violence, and like it's something that just happens to women like the weather. The fact that men are responsible for 98% of this violence simply evaporates." I kept this in mind when I was reading the 8 articles, and out of the 8, all headlines state the victim was a woman, but only 2 headlines state that there was a male assailant involved. My conclusion is that the overrepresentation of women as victims of violence is not only an alarming statistic, but a detriment to society. This epidemic may be a women's issue, but since the violence is generally perpetrated by men, it's an even greater men's issue. With normalizing the violent and masculine male, society has created an environment where men are expected to be and are raised as the more aggressive gender. With this mentality, along with women being the lesser other sex, the outcome is too often violence against women. The large percentage of violent crimes against women, which also involve sexual assault, is also alarmingly high, representing the male over female dominance. According to Jackson Katz, 86% of domestic violence incidences are perpetuated by men, with 99% of rape being perpetuated by men. My observations show that domestic violence is happening all around us, and although my headlines do not point out a specific geographical or racial issue, the intersectionalities of race and violence, as well as social class and violence, show great relevance in the Stats Canada information. I feel that educating young men and women from a young age would help these percentages decrease big time. If the population was aware of the root causes, we could all work from the bottom up in our educational systems to change the mentality. The domino effect that violence against women has on society is absolutely paramount in how the children will continue to grow up and how they will choose to act in their own relationships. Awareness of the support for both victims and abusers is also extremely important to help those who are reaching out for help. This has spurred a few other thoughts of mine. I would like to do some more research on how the social classes, the socioeconomic roles play into violence against women. Although we see domestic violence on all points of the social spectrum, there is no doubt that the lower income families represent a higher percentage of the incidences, according to the Stats Canada page. Some questions that came up during my analysis were what types of things we can do as a society to raise awareness about violence against women. How can the government support educators to address this epidemic? And what can we do as future educators to discuss these difficult topics with our students? And what are some actions I can take, every single day to make positive steps towards a gender equality and a safer world for women in general? This is my bibliography. I won't read it, but I will send the link so you can check it out. Yeah, that's my story. Thank you for watching.